All right, guys, in today's episode, I sit down with Josh and Kyle from G9 Defense. They are revolutionizing the firearms industry with the bullets that they're manufacturing right here in Post Falls, Idaho. Let's go. Welcome to the North Idaho Experience, a podcast of, by, and for the people of North Idaho and those who are North Idaho curious. These are the stories of the incredible folks who call North Idaho home. And if you are thinking about making North Idaho your home, give our real estate team a call, text, or email, info@nidexperience.com. I've got Joshua and Kyle from G9 Defense. Welcome to the show, you guys.
Thank you.
They are a local, let me get this right, design and, well, no, what do you call it? It's not a, it's an intellectual
It's an intellectual property company.
That's awesome. They design and manufacture high-quality ammo for defense purposes. And the cool thing is they're made right here in North Idaho. You guys, your business is incredible, and it's blowing up, I think would be an accurate description of it.
We hope not. There's a lot of gunpowder and primers sitting on shelves. So.
Valid point. Wrong word, but you know where I'm going with that. So I wanted to start in. Joshua is the founder, and I wanted to kind of dive into like the background. What's your background? How did you get into this? And then we'll kind of go through the whole process if you're good with that.
Sure. Everyone asks about the background, and they're looking for the answer of how we came to the designs we have. It's not there. And so my background's pretty varied. I took a lot of things from like the family business is auto body. And so I understand how to shoot through cars because I understand the shapes that cut metal in the first place. And so there's some of that, understanding the metallurgy and how things are made and fixed. But I had worked with a tree trimming company for a while, and that helped me a lot on leadership. Everything you don't do in leadership, this guy was doing. And so it was there's those things, but really the answer to how it came about was I was given a church security team mid-crisis and talked to the pastors and the leadership and said, I'm never going to do that again. And they said, what would it take for you to run the church security team? And I told them at that point, I said I'd have to have control over certain things. And one of the things I wanted to have control over was the type of ammo we used. And these guys were using semi-wad cutters that they loaded in their garage or Winchester white box or, whatever it was. They had Makarov in Uncle Mike's holsters. And so at that point, I said, we're going to change these things. And so we did a good job on changing it. Everyone likes to buy gear and everyone likes to do training and stuff like that. Nobody wanted to buy ammo. And so I recommended at that point in time to that local law enforcement were using, and they didn't, they were too expensive and they didn't have them in their caliber. They, all these excuses came up. And so I pushed on it and they pushed back and they said, the things that you're recommending aren't reliable. They don't do any better. The stuff I made in my garage is just as good. And so local law enforcement got with me, and it was a friend that we went through. And so we dug through about 10 years worth of FBI reports, and it turns out that they were right, that it was no more effective. And we had his interest in it was they had a Bonnie and Clyde style bank robbery where husband and wife were in, I want to say it was a Honda Civic or something. And so they rob a bank and they start shooting it out with the cops, and over this like 10-mile car chase, there was 138 hits on this car. None of them penetrated the package into the people through the package tray. It was stopping everything. And so they're shooting gold dots was what they were carrying back then. So a 40, 45, 9mm, all calibers we used. She's shooting a 9mm with Winchester white box, and there was 3 officers shot, 2 of them badly. One of them got caught in a vest, if I remember right. One got shot and broke a femur, and another one clipped a blood vessel. That was, it was an event there. And working in auto body, we got to see the car. The car actually got towed to our place, and so I looked at all these things, and so it was a point of conversation. When we look at this, it turns out that the FMJs were actually doing really well on the FBI reports and the coroner's reports. Yeah. And so they were getting good penetration through barriers. And within a little bit, I was given an idea for a bullet. And when I say given an idea, everyone has their backstory. And mine is I'm highly dyslexic. And so that translated to being stupid. Like that, my teachers never pulled that out. And so my 5th grade teacher told the class that there's really smart people in the world. There's doctors, there's lawyers, there's people like this. And those people are going to have people take care of them. They're going to sweep floors and take out the trash and stuff. So don't worry about it. Joshua's going to find his place. And that was her encouragement, you know? And so at that point, I remember thinking that I'm not intelligent like others are. And so going through that, I feel like that was put me as an empty vessel. And so I learned like my idea of how I see things and the spatial aspects of things. I can rotate things in my mind, and in an engine, I can even see an engine working and see how all the pieces go in disassembling and putting them back together. Most people can't think on those levels like that.
So you don't have an engineering background or anything?
No.
Okay.
So my wife is a mechanical engineer. I have a business background. She runs the business, and I do all the designs.
Okay.
Makes a solid marriage because we need each other.
Well, I'm thinking about this. You looking at this car that has been shot 130-something times, and prior to the show, you said you've been loading ammo since you were 13.
Sure.
So was that automatically what was going through your mind when you were looking at this car? Curious how each round interacted with certain places of the car, certain places of the vehicle, and why that didn't penetrate?
Yeah, the way I think about things, I was 38 before I figured out I thought about things differently than others. And so my son was diagnosed with dyslexia at that point. And so they said, this is a non-normal way of thinking about it. And I'm like, that's perfectly normal. That's how I think about it. But I would see these in loading ammo. I would know and see what the bullet was going to do based on its construction. And I had a high level of predictability on that. And so I could, Nikola Tesla said that he was testing engines and motors in his mind. And then so he was never making some of these, and he would kill a design based on how it performed in his mind. And so I see things, how they play out ahead of time, and I can understand angles, and then through testing it gets backed up or not. But I'm fairly predictive on that, and I think that's the background that everyone's looking for. That's what got me to making bullets.
Hey hunters and fellow meat eaters, do you want 100% success rate of putting meat in your freezer this year? Then buy beef from Acme Acres. It's pasture raised, grass fed, grass finished, no hormones, no antibiotics, just delicious, clean, all American beef raised right here in North Idaho. Order right off the website or give them a call to get going on your custom cut sheet. And if you buy a whole beef, you get a free freezer. Acme Acres. I'm nervous because you mentioned Gold Dot, and that's what I carry currently.
Sure.
I'm sure that's about to change after today, but that's always been my favorite round. And I told this story recently on a podcast, but I'll mention it again now because it's pretty relevant. I was involved in a officer-involved shooting a long time ago. My partner shot a dude that was wearing a very thick Carhartt winter jacket. Mm-hmm. I think we were using like Ranger or something like that at the time, 40 cal, hollow point, and we dragged the guy out of the car. I'm helping cut his clothes off. So I'm helping the paramedics, and bullet fragments are falling out of the clothing. And I literally plucked a round that was like partially embedded in his abdomen. I pulled it right out of his abdomen because it didn't penetrate. And I was blown away by that. Like, it made me realize something. These hollow point rounds are amazing, but if they're hitting something prior to the body, it's a good chance it's going to deform or disintegrate or whatever. So the rounds were really ineffectual. Sure. Kind of bugged me for a while, to be honest.
Well, and Gold Dot was my favorite back in the day. Like that's what I recommended to everybody was Gold Dot. That's what local law enforcement were carrying, and so I think they did well. For that technology, I think it's a good bullet. Mm-hmm. But you guys drove here today.
Yep.
Okay. Did you gas engine, diesel, electric?
Gas.
Okay. Why didn't you take a steam engine? And so if you look at the bullet technology and the design where it was and everything and the timeline of it, that's the same timeline. And so we had copper jacketed bullets at the end of the Civil War. We had hollow points end of the Civil War. You had centerfire rifles end of the Civil War. So that's where that technology is. It has advanced to where it kind of peaked probably in the 90s or so, where there's not a lot of new stuff coming out in hollow points. The monolithics, there are some advancements there, But basically, you have a fairly slow projectile that just expands in caliber, but it keeps that roundish shape. And so what you're doing is as shapes go through things, you have to get an amount of cast off, and so you can only get a rifle type wound at about 2,100 feet per second impact velocity and up. And at that point, then you are expanding tissue fast enough to enough degree, the elasticity is broken, and you've gone beyond that. Now you've done damage, and so you're tearing blood vessels at that point. Below that speed, if you don't rub it and if you're not crushing it, you're not damaging it. And so a hollow point, you're putting, best case scenario, you're putting, say, a 70 caliber crush wound through that. These crush wounds aren't very effective, because if you can imagine taking a very elastic, say, garden hose or something, and you pinch it down, it's going to kind of close those off. So there's not a lot of bleeding associated with that. If you have an archery wound, though, that cuts through there, those things, they bleed like crazy. And so what we're doing is the mechanism that it uses is we're using the cast off very similar to the way a water jet would cut through AR-500. So we're getting that liquefied tissue and blood to move at such a rate, and even when it hits bone, it creates secondaries. And so as a pistol round, we're creating secondaries at below that threshold of rifle speed. And so what we've done is we create, if you look at the front of our bullets, basically they look like a boat propeller is what we hear a lot. And so this boat propeller is shaped in a way that it casts things out. And so if you've ever washed a spoon and you have it face down and it goes under the water, the water will go around it. And that's what you have going on with a hollow point. Flip that spoon over and the whole kitchen gets wet. And that's what we have with the G9 technology.
That's a great analogy. Okay. Now, and that relies on the rotational energy of the bullet, right? How fast is a bullet rotating? Or no, maybe
no. Okay. And so what it does is ours has a spiral cut to it. And so one of two things, we're going to go against the rotation of the bullet quite a bit, and that's going to create a greater surface area for that boat propeller to be. So it's a bigger propeller in a smaller diameter, or we'll go with it like our external hollow point. And the external hollow point is more like a water slide, really, is what I'd have, because it loads on there and it's going with the rotation. I want that rotation to continue because I want straight penetration. People think that our bullets flip around, which they absolutely do not. I've seen, I don't know if it's hundreds, but it's a bunch of high speed, and I've never seen a bullet flip around until the end. It will go down to the end of the gel. The gel will spring it back. Every once in a while, it flips around backwards, but it's traveled straight forward. And so what we're trying to do is keep that tip forward for very straight penetration, because you're not shooting the target, you shoot the target within the target. And so 22s are famous for glancing off ribs or skulls, or we had a few shootings in Texas over a 5-day period that kind of introduced G9 to law enforcement. It was a major brand that they used through the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. And they had, once these were shot through windshields, they became wholly ineffective. And it would pierce, one guy was shot in the head. It had pierced his skin, run around his skull, and then exited through the back of the head. So it looked like he got shot right through the skull. It never did anything to his skull. It was, and as that, he continued the fight after that. And so that was disconcerting that the officer sees he gets a center hit on the head through a windshield, and nothing happens.
Okay, and that was a different brand.
It is.
And you guys have real life already, right?
Oh, sure.
Scenarios? No, what am I looking for? Experiences?
Case studies, yeah.
Case
There you
studies.
go.
There you go. Where G9's been used.
Sure, we had early on. We had a U.S. Marshals. It's a Lone Star Fugitive Task Force, and so they hunt career criminals that are known to be dangerous, and that's all they do. Those guys are using it a lot, and that was our first stuff that came out. And so with just who they were and what they're doing, we had a lot of skeptics in there, and some of those guys are good friends now because we've had enough phone calls back and forth, and that we actually have an office out of Texas, and so they've gotten to where they know us well and we're friends.
Yeah. Wow.
The first shooting, the guy in the office there got a phone call, and he was holding his 6-month-old baby, feeding her a bottle, saying, 6 hours ago, I was in a shooting. A guy's got a Glock, 3 feet from me, pointing at my chest, pressing on the trigger. I got my trigger to go off first, and he flopped to the ground. Wow. And so with a handgun, you don't get instantaneous. And that was a high thoracic, no central nervous system, high thoracic hit. And so we've had a multitude of these where you get a high thoracic hit, and they hit the ground, and they're done, they're out. And so it was an 18 Delta that told me he believes that not only is it's stopping the threat, because not only is there enough damage done that they're gonna die, but they faint at the same time. And so there's not this response. We see that deer hunting as well. We make a lot of hunting ammo, and I've seen these shapes that we're talking about. We actually went and gone to Africa several times and hunted with these same shapes that are in the pistol rounds in rifle stuff. And we have Cape buffalo that are known to be just a really tough animal. And we have 2 of them on video that got non-life-threatening hits on them from a not an extraordinarily large caliber, and they laid down on the spot. We've had the farthest any of them moved was 12 yards from the initial impact. And so that's ridiculous. They acted like they were spine hit, but they were nowhere near the spine, 5 inches from the spine, yet it was enough shock that it stunned them, and they laid down.
Oh, that's wild. I now know that I don't want to get shot with G9. Describe the bullet itself. What's it made out of?
So we use solid metal. So it's a copper or copper alloy. Some of the designs that are, so it's federally regulated to use brass and steel. And we do that, but then we have to be selling either overseas to the law enforcement or to military. And so everything that people are going to know us by is a copper alloy. And so on that, the machine that makes them is called a Swiss turn or a multi-spindle. But we're going to first cut the bullet, and we're going to cut a normal bullet shape. And then we come in with a ball end mill, and we scallop out 3 or 4 flutes, depending on what we're doing. And these flutes then channel fluid. And the channeling of the fluid, when we make that, we're making actually a tube, but we only make half the tube. And so if you look at the Venturi effect, solids and liquids are incompressible, and so as you hit this at the speed, even the solids that we think of on a tissue become liquid, and so as it goes through, we're going to put it through these little areas, these little tubes now, and so we will increase the speed of it, because the Venturi effect says that if you have a fat pipe and it goes to a skinny pipe, you're going to speed up to make it through because you can't compress it. So, right. And so what we've done is we've taken these tubes, and as it goes through, the other half of the tube is made by whatever we're shooting it to. So these jets come out. We're using a couple different things there. With the little bit of rotation that we have, we keep the fluid in the tube. And then from there, we actually have every design we have has a parabolic curve to it. And so if you were to take a ramp and you roll a marble down a flat ramp or one with a parabolic curve, you can get 37% faster on that parabolic curve. And so you drop the marble same time, it's going to come off. Well, it's traveled even more distance, but it's faster. And so what we're looking for is cast off velocity. I want sideways, because when we shoot these things into gel, we will get it to come in at the same exact depth every time. Like you can bologna slice the gel and all the bullets are going to be there. And most hollow points are going to come in and they'll be 12 to 16 inches. They're going to have a 4-inch range on what they're doing. We come in at 18 every time. Our law enforcement military stuff go a little bit deeper because the newer studies, we have most of the civilian world stuck in the FBI protocol that is 12 to 18 inches. Law enforcement, international stuff, military, they're asking for deeper, because they understand that you guys don't know if you're old enough to know this, but did you grow up playing airsoft paintball, or did you shoot each other with BB guns?
BB guns, yeah.
BB
I grew up in the 80s.
Yep. And so with BB guns, if you get 5 pumps on a BB gun, you shoot each other, it never penetrates the skin.
Right.
And so we calibrate gel with 5 pumps on a BB gun, 585 feet per second. It goes about 3.5 inches into the gel. There's a range that it can go with that BB. And so gel is not an equation for tissue. And people think it is. Like, I don't want to shoot through 18 inches. Well, you're not going to. And they had, Texas just had one that's kind of interesting. There was a shooting where a guy was shot in the small of the back, did not hit his spine, did not hit his belt. It was through a t-shirt, and he was shot with a major brand hollow point, and none of them penetrated 5 inches.
Wow.
And so none of them were lethal. He was actually killed by the shots from the front from a different officer.
Back to the cast off speed. So I'm trying to understand this. It basically, that cast off is the own blood and tissue from the person, and that is causing the damage.
Sure.
Because it accelerates away.
Yeah.
Am I getting that right? Can you see that in ballistic gel, or does
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like it's a cool thing. We'll and if we get you guys out to the shop, we'll actually shoot it with you and dye it,
Yeah,
and
I
you can
wanna do
see. And so what we'll get is typically on our 9mm, we're going to get somewhere between a 3 to 4 inch cross section cavity, permanent wound in gel. And so we're using ordnance gel. I don't like the synthetic. Synthetic is really hard to do the same thing time and time again. You can't really calibrate it. Ordnance gel is very consistent. And so we actually use pork gelatin, but you can see these. And so the 1980-ish FBI protocol for testing bullets, they went about it the wrong way. I think they asked the wrong question. And what they were asking was, I want to see what the bullet looks like. So they're going to measure how deep the bullet went, how much it expanded, and what it weighs at the end. They get scores based on those things. Well, what did the gel look like? Because after you shoot someone in law enforcement, are you digging the bullet out and putting on a necklace? Are you what are you doing with that bullet? The bullet matters. It's the wound that matters.
Right.
And so the JSOC went and they commissioned a place out of Houston, Texas, to start doing testing a different way. And so they did it in gelatin. They did a lot of barriers, and they also used beef brisket. And then they didn't care what the bullet looked like. They cared what the wounds looked like. And so they started doing that. And when they did that, this test was done unbeknownst to us, and they called us because they're like, we have some of these rounds. And I'm like, well, you shouldn't, because that's some stuff that was given out to the military for testing. Well, we're testing for them. And so we developed this relationship. It's called Viper Weapons Training. They're out of Houston, and they're doing testing, but they're putting the emphasis on what it did. And so when we look at that, our 9mm, depending on the variety, get somewhere in the mid-teens to low 20s in cubic inches of wound. And that's significant because that gold dot we're talking about, the 124 plus P gold dot, if I remember right, gets 3.8 cubic inches.
Whoa.
And FMJ gets 2.2.
Whoa, that is a huge difference.
And so that FMJ can go, it will be in the 30-inch mark, but it is a sub-caliber wound. And so the tissue and everything will fold right back around on it. And that's what we see in a lot of these things.
Does a traditional hollow point have any cast off as well, or is it a different function?
It will for a millisecond. And so as things open up, typically they get to a point where they have this really good shape, and then they fold back on themselves. And so and you'll see this in the gel, is that there's something around the 3-inch mark, usually 5-inch mark, somewhere in there, where you get this big plume, and then it goes back down small.
Okay.
And so there is a point.
I'm developing an image in my mind of this tiny little ball of hate that you created that hits, and then just spurt like a water jet coming away from it.
Right.
Sure.
It's creating its own water jet, and it's just blasting everything.
Yeah. The shape of the wound is very similar to like a Coke bottle. And so it tapers off with speed. It's not totally linear, but it will, the diameter of the wound will go down with speed. And so at the end, it tapers down. It's bigger at the front. There's a couple good things there, because inside a lab, we can create the perfect environment to test a hollow point. And these hollow points, if you're shooting bare gel and you're caring about what it looks like, then you start putting different fibers in front of it, and these hollow points start failing. And so then they put plastic and other things inside the tip of them to try to do that. Well, that creates new sets of issues. But what we're doing is inside the magazine, inside the barrel, in flight, ours is ready to go. It's the perfect cast-off shape. And if we can make it resilient enough that it goes through the barrier and still looks like that, that's something that is remarkable. I think that it works on contact, and we'll see the front of the gel will have a triangular shaped pattern where the gel on the first millimeter of being hit already starts cutting itself. And so the face of the gel will show these lines. And so we have what people talk about as zero neck. How long did it go in before it started working? Well, that magical 5-inch point or 4-inch point, whatever that is with a hollow point, If you figure it out, skin, they say, is between 3 to 4 inches of gel is where the skin is at. And the skin on the front side, the back side is different because you have one that is backed and one that is loose. So the back side works more like a catcher's mitt to catch things. Our bullets are low density. You get most coppers are coming in at about 9 grams per cubic centimeter. And so you add lead to that, and they get up 11 to 14, depending on the ratio there on what the lead bullets are going to do. They have a better chance of popping through the skin on the backside given density. Our low density bullets typically don't pop through the skin.
Do they deform at all, generally?
If I've done my job, no.
Okay.
So going through windshields, they can. Windshield glass is one of the harder substances on Earth. It's very brittle, but it's extremely hard.
Yeah.
That was going to be my next question. There's so many videos out there where you watch law enforcement. A lot of these gunfights are occurring inside the car, or it's mobile and they're trying to protrude through their front windshield, which is extremely difficult for a bullet to still hit its target. It's thick, it's dense, and it has to go out, and that flight's obviously going to change. In our experience, it goes up. In your brain, you kind of think that it goes down, but it's where friction's created, so those rounds tend to go up. How do your bullets perform through glass in those testing simulations? It sounds like you guys do really well against some of the major brands out there. I'm curious how they do through glass.
Yeah, that's where that was our first big win, and that's the thing that got us on the map. And still, that's usually where law enforcement asks for our stuff is we go through, and so the law enforcement rounds are deviating about an inch or less per meter. And so most of them are spot on. Every once in a while, we'll see one that the flute hit just wrong and it yaws a little bit. And so when you think about glass, we've studied glass a whole bunch, and you have a slanted windshield. The bullet is going to go through the shortest amount of glass. And so if you're shooting in on the slant, it's going to hit it. The shortest amount is down. And so typically shooting into a vehicle, you're going to get deflection down. Shooting out, you get deflection up. It can be a lot. One of our claims to fame is even our civilian round, we look at just over an inch per meter. And so if you're shooting to the backseat of a Suburban, and we have this on video, backseat of a Suburban is pretty much undoable with most any hollow point. And we had a 5-shot group shooting, new spots in the glass every time, aiming bridge in the nose on a human target to hitting just base of the nose, upper lip. And so we had about, on average, 2 to 2.5 inches of deviation over the distance from windshield to third row seating in a Suburban.
That's incredible.
So, and that's what we do though, is there's different dynamics. And so glass gets struck, it goes back to sand. And so we have all these little particles, and you got to move those particles out of the way. And if you have a good clean windshield and you shoot it, one of the things I noticed, we had the sun coming up kind of low, and you could see all the glass particles. It was out in that triangle we were talking about earlier on the gel. And so these flutes that we create, it's just like the flutes in a drill bit. And so we have a place for that media to go and clear out. Now we have a clean hole to go through. And so we won't deviate. There are things that you can do in training. They say shoot through the same hole, and which is kind of hard with a moving vehicle and a running, I mean, that's not reality. But in trying some of these things, we try to shoot a big hole and then continue through that. If you clip the side of it, we're going to yaw off just like everything else, because we're back to physics now. And so you have half the bullet struck, it's going to move it the other way. But basically we can do that. We do have some specialty military stuff that is mostly steel, and I got to say we have never seen a deviation through that one whatsoever through glass.
So the actual bullet is steel.
Yeah, and so we shot that one. There's always one guy in the crowd that wants to push it to the extreme. So we shot a car through the nadir bar. So the intrusion beam, which is usually high strength steel. Pretty hard to get through. We do that plus the vehicle exterior shell. We shoot level 3 armor, and we still made it 10 inches into the gel. And so at that point we can do pillar to pillar on our 9mm stuff. And so on the law enforcement and military side, there's options. And so when we push that out, and basically what we're doing is we've created a really good shape, and then we push that to a more resiliency. Copper, I don't use what people think of as copper. There are coppers that are prohibited by law to use in bullets. We have run up to the edge on that. So I get the hardest copper I can get. And then we do things in the way that we machine it, we're trying to make it more and more resilient. And that's how we get the win, is we're not a very soft copper bullet. So we do well on barriers because we can get through those and still retain that shape.
Kevlar. Will it punch through Kevlar?
Interesting question.
Yeah. Can you talk about that or no?
So here's the external hollow point took me a long time because the reality, and people get angry about this, that I won't give them something that's going to be outside of the bounds of reality on that. And so what we did is, yes, they do go through Kevlar more frequently than I would want. Mm-hmm. And so the external hollow point was designed that it would stop in 3A. If you're shooting anything less than 3A, if it is expired, if it is near the edge, we do get penetrations on those. The intent of the bullet was actually to stop because there's class of ammunition, and so we have light domestic, and that's a class, and so the external hollow point was made for that class of ammunition. We get best in class in all those barriers that it's supposed to pass through. Then we get hard barrier, and then you have armor. And so we have best in class in all three categories. And in that category, if we punch through armor on a regular basis, we now get moved up to the next class. And then that puts us out. The ATF will put it as a special threat. And so if it's intended to go through, then the people that are upset about not having that next class up, and it's not me regulating it, that's the U.S. government.
Right.
And so if we do that on a regular basis, we jump up a class. And so most of the time, we will get caught in Kevlar if it's 3A and it's quality.
Okay.
So that it can still be available to the public.
Yep. But as far as other barriers, and so that's remarkable, we get that one scores a 99% reliability plus inside its class. And so we are doing windshields, we're doing car bodies, we're doing 2x4 plywood, the 3 layers of denim, what like that stuff's not even
Carhartt jackets.
Oh yeah.
There we go.
All those things. And so the reality is we want something that's going to work on a down vest. This is Coeur d'Alene. There's a lot of down vests running around this time of year. The nylon and the down will defeat almost any hollow point.
No way.
There is not a hollow point that does exceptional through drywall, and they're going to say no. We have ours filled with a plastic tip. So in our testing, we test a bunch and we shoot everybody else's stuff. I've never seen one that worked reliably. With drywall defeats everything. With us, the only difference is the beginning of our wound channel in the gel has drywall dust in it. And other than that, it's the exact same thing. It cleans out the drywall if it does cling to it. So
why is drywall so difficult?
Because you're packing a substrate in there that's non-fluid. And so you've packed in a chalk in the front of this that then doesn't react like a fluid, and you have to have that pressure to open up a hollow point, and so you can pack it really easily. On the rifle side, we knew that as well, and so hollow points are really hard to get away from. They're easy and fast to produce, and we offer some hollow points, and I think that again they're really really pretty advanced. But we've done some things about how we cut them and the materials we use and stuff. But if you step up the next level, the good, better, best, if we go to that best category, we've actually taken very resistant centerpieces to rifle bullets. So we'll cut a cylinder out of tungsten steel, brass, something that's not going to change, and we'll flute it. So this pointed bullet now has these little flutes that then is basically shoved inside a hollow point. There's a couple interesting things that take place. The pressure goes through the roof when you do this because you've created a forcing cone. When it's flying through the air, though, inside the barrel, these flutes will pack full of air, and it will be the most compressed it can be. As it slows down, you will get a little bit of pressure leak over that. It just adds to the slipstream of the bullet. It doesn't change the BC. And so it flies through the air as if there's no hollow points. And it's unique because we have this spire point out in front. When we hit a windshield or we hit something resistant, it goes in looking like a bullet, comes out looking like a bullet, and we get point of aim, point of impact through vehicles. Sometimes through multiple vehicles, like with our 308 law enforcement sniper stuff, we can do that. When it hits fluid, though, we pack the multitude, 3 to 5 hollow points typically around the outside, and that forcing cone now can even fracture a brass bullet. And so we'll hydraulically fracture brass. And so you make these sharp little shards that are low density, that stop easy, but they get these archery type wounds. This is where in the hunting, we get uncommonly dramatic ends to these things when it's when we're using brass with a spire point in the center.
Okay, so rifle round, I'm just recapping here. That the flutes cause air to it pressurizes the air because it's packing in there tighter, and that is when it hits a hard object, that air is keeping, like if it hit drywall, that drywall's not going to pack in there because the air is there.
Yeah, it's a center tip. So we're off to a different shape. I should have brought some as an example here, but we basically have a smooth looking bullet, and there is a center tip to it. I'm sure you guys have seen AP rounds that have a steel piece in the front. Okay. So think of M855A1. But what we've done is in that centerpiece, we fluted it. So now these holes are at the midsection of the bullet rather than on the tip. And so they'll go through and it goes through and it sheds anything that's not liquid, it sheds it to where you won't pack glass inside of it, you won't pack steel inside of it, you don't deform that tip. If you hit drywall doesn't go in because that tip is casting everything out. Okay. When it hits fluid, the fluid packs in there, and now you get this really dramatic with a lot of lateral. And so what you're looking at, if you get lead to break up at 1,600 feet per second, basically. And so if you shoot something, you get a 15-degree cone, these little bits of lead go off. The lead goes back to a round-ish shape because it's soft, and so it goes. And so now you're crushing tissue. When you go in there and you hydraulically fracture things, we can get up to a 70-degree lateral cone. And that's what you're wanting. It works with fluid. Mammals have about 90%, 85% of their fluid are inside their organs. And so this is very, very targeted. And with deer and elk, you have marginal calibers that really produce exceptional kills on deer and elk.
So basically all of your rounds, even the pistol stuff, it will punch through hard surfaces, and then when it hits a body, that's when it does its work.
Yep.
So you don't have overpenetration. So you would have no issue as home defense round in your house. Well, I guess maybe you would, huh? Is that an issue? Because you potentially punching through sheetrock?
So a couple things. I believe that that overpenetration is a myth. And I have looked and I've challenged everyone on this one. Show me a time where a law enforcement, like studied case where law enforcement shot through somebody and then hit someone else.
Right. And so usually they miss, right? Yeah. And then it goes through something.
Okay, and so if there's a miss, we're going to be just as lethal. Going through drywall, we're still good. Everyone wants something that will bounce off drywall. They want every penetrated barrier in front of the bad guy, but nothing in front of their daughter's room.
Right. You can't do that.
There's
the
limits to
don't
physics.
Know the difference. Yeah.
Sure, but I would absolutely use it because inside, if you have something as a hollow point, we go back to that church security. So inside a church, you have 700 people inside a single room. If there's a shoot through, something's going to happen there. Yeah. And so with that, if you have that nylon jacket or shirt or something clogs that hollow point, now you're getting that 30 inches of penetration because it's back to that FMJ shape, and so there's nothing to stop it. And so we have that never fail thing that we're always going to create a hydraulic as soon as it hits tissue. And we have there was a shooting by law enforcement. There was a suspect ran into a parking garage, and one was changing levels, coming up or coming down, comes out the door, and they meet each other, both gun in hand, just bad breath distance. And Josh got his shot off first and got a second shot, hits him high thoracic. He goes to the ground, just follows up with another one because he was adrenalized. As he's falling, his second shot actually hit him here above the clavicle. And so there's very little meat there. And as it went through, it's the only one that we know of that has ever exited for us. And so on that exit, when he handcuffed him, and the bullet fell out of his shirt. And so the shirt had caught it. Wow. And so it had dumped all of its energy, and even though it exited, a cotton shirt caught it. And so it's one of those things. Overpenetration is not the concern that I think people would have for it. Is your round going to be effective, and is it going to have that ability to dump its energy on impact? Hollow points can or cannot, and that's that unreliability. We're running in a rate where our designs are coming in usually around 99% reliable. They're going to do the same thing regardless of barrier.
What calibers do you guys carry?
All the normal handgun stuff. We're getting into some of the revolvers. We got 44s on the market now.
I wrote a little note here to ask about 357 because I didn't see it on the website.
Everyone asks about that, and I wish we did it. I've had a good 357 bullet for 9 years now, probably, and so we ask our vendors, do you want 357? Yes, absolutely. How much? Well, we'll take a pallet of 9mm and I'll take a box of 357. Right. And I just can't, for us to do a new caliber, the minimum cost on that is 58 grand. And so to change over equipment, and I got to be able to recoup that within a quarter. And 357 hasn't been there.
Yeah. Okay. Bummer. Darn it.
How about shotguns? Are you messing around at all with shotguns?
So you guys are familiar with Genesis?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Awesome company.
I have one.
Yeah, they had talked to me for a while, and then Cody told me he was going to pick me up and smash me into the ground if I didn't give him a design for a shotgun round. We've got a design. They want to. They want something that would be. There's a U.S. entity that wants to stop vehicles. And so they're looking for that. And so we designed a steel, kind of similar shaped one that would punch through hard things on a vehicle.
If you hit a body with that, my goodness.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay, I really want to see the
Disintegrate.
testing for that.
In the
thing.
words of Grand Thumb, it's missed.
Yeah.
Yes.
That'd be accurate. Holy moly.
Oh, that's cool.
That'd be pretty fun. Okay, so pistol rounds. Oh, also, I know you have the something for the outdoors, right? I can't remember what you guys call it. The outdoorsman or
The woodsman?
Woodsman, yeah.
Yep.
I carry that in my 10 millimeter. So I do have some G9. And that's pretty darn impressive. Tell me about that round, because that's shaped differently than what we've been talking about.
Yeah, we're getting nearly the penetration that you get out of hard cast. And so in a 10 millimeter, you're looking at 200 or 220 grain hard cast. You don't have the issues in the stock Glock barrels that you can with hard cast. And so basically you have to switch out your barrel. We're at 145 grains, and we're moving at a rate that we can create cast off, but it goes deep and straight. And the Woodsman was actually an interesting where that came about. I got a phone call in the middle of the night, and I thought it was one of my friends pranking me, because it was this fake accent, and he wants me to give him a round for shooting polar bears with. And I'm like, yeah, everyone hunts polar bears. That makes sense. And so he starts talking about how they shot a bunch of polar bears and muskox, and they're not happy with what they're doing. I'm like, well, do you want a 375 H&H? Do you want a 300 Win Mag? What are we looking at? And he goes, I want to use a 9 millimeter. I'm like, a 9 millimeter. He goes, yeah, we've been using 10 millimeters and it's not working, so we're switching to 9. And I'm like, that makes no sense. And so he explained that that the guys that are doing this had 10 millimeters issued to them, and they're using a hollow point, and they had muskox run over a guy that shot it multiple times, and all the hair and everything. It just did not work. And what they were doing is they're going out on the ice and they're setting up radio equipment. And with their skis, they can't have any more weight, or their snowshoes, they can't. They're limited on that. So they issue them a pistol, and they're switching to the SIG 320s. And so this is several years back. And so we had a design that had some promise that I was using for a subsonic round. It overpenetrated by a whole bunch, and so we kind of shelved it. 8 days later, we have something that is probably the premier round there in 9 millimeter for doing that. They tested it, liked it, it worked. Turns out it was an international number. It wasn't and it was a country's MOD that was calling us for this. So we met them at SHOT Show, showed them the design, shipped them some ammo, and so that's kind of where it came out of, was to shoot polar bears.
Well, that stuff's impressive. What's the I can't remember the penetration on the 10.
So the third party puts us at 40 to 42 inches of penetration.
Holy moly.
For shooting polar bears.
Yeah.
Well, how's the 9? Is the 9 similar?
9's coming in at 38, if I remember right.
So, I mean, you'd be fine rocking your 9 milli up here for the bears too, huh?
Yeah, they're going to be a smaller wound than we typically see. And so that one's going to get, and we went for depth of penetration. It has a little lawn dart-like tip on the front of it, and so it will track straight. And what we did that for is it wouldn't bounce off a bear's skull. Bears have a very aerodynamic skull, and they're covered in muscle, and so you get a lot of glancing shots on it. And we did that just so it tracked through. The shape of it there, we're back to that parabolic curve, but it's in a 360. And so the cast off isn't as great as what we see when we have a little more length to work with, like on the external hollow point, but penetration's where we wanted it, and so we want deep straight penetration.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a really impressive round. What about rifle rounds? What do you guys have for that?
So our best seller in the rifle is called a 54 grain barrier blind hollow point in our 5.56. Okay. It is actually 53 and a half. And what we did is, I'm a heavy for caliber guy. That's my background. And so I assumed that a 70 grain all copper bullet would be the thing in a 5.56. And we tested everything from 35 to 70. And it turns out the peak of that curve is 53.5. And so we can get good performance out of a 10.3 inch barrel, and we get very, very similar performance out of a 20 inch barrel. Okay. And so for that one, we get, it was tested a bunch on hogs because I had a hard time believing that light of bullet was going to do it. But for law enforcement, it shoots through pillars really well. We've actually had more penetrations and this is independent tests, more penetrations than green tip on pillars with a 54 grain all copper bullet. Wow. It goes really well through windshields. We have a design that has steel in it, and we actually opted away from the steel design for this one because of how well it did in windshields. And when you look at it, the hollow point is too big. And it pays a penalty in low BCs, but the high muzzle velocity kind of overcomes that for the normal ranges. And what we did is that little bit more of a hollow point there keeps us from yawing on windshields. And so a little wider one did a lot better on barriers. So all things considered, I think it's a very good, gets a B+ in every category. And really what you want, if you're assassinating people and you can plan it out and everything, then get a very, very specific bullet. But for law enforcement, they're reacting to everything. There's never a time they're being ambushed. And so if it's always going to be defensive, you got to have something that just wins in every situation.
Yeah.
Maybe not wins the best, but wins in every situation. Yeah.
And for absolutely. That, it also hits a price point that is very doable for law enforcement. We have one that we're releasing right now that is a big deal on the 308 sniper side. The hardest shooting job in all of the professionals professions there, I believe, is law enforcement sniping. They are heavily scrutinized. They may get used only a couple times in their career, if that. They typically, I think their typical shot is 58 yards. If you take out the couple of outliers that went around 500 yards, it drops down to like 44 yards. And so they're extremely close, and they're looking at high levels of precision, and they almost always have a barrier. And so what they have is they have a glass round, they have a barrier round, they have an open air round, and then they have a gun that only shoots one of those well, and they have to remember the data, and they have to change the data on their scope, and they have to switch out a magazine or dump the rounds out of their gun, and then reload them, and then do it again depending on how the situation changes.
And fast.
Yep.
Make that decision really, really quick, and those adjustments fast.
And so we have one that right now puts us best in class on barriers, glass, and open air. And so it's, again, we're doing things different. It's a 130 grain bullet. Most people in the 308 are going to the 168s and 175s. And we tend to not penetrate any more than anything else. We've created a phenomenal wound because we got so much speed going with that. They're over 3,000 feet per second, even in the shorter barrels. And so to spill off all that speed, we need to create a big wound to make that stop. Does well in barriers, doesn't yaw. And we actually had 747 glass and transparent armor and things that we've been shooting through, and demoed that in front of law enforcement out at Leopold's. It was in September is when we started that.
Awesome. I'm going to go back for a second. So you said you tested this on hogs. Was this like in a lab with already deceased hogs, or like from a helicopter in Texas?
Please tell me.
Because if you needed testing, dude, I know a guy that would be perfectly willing to help out.
That's probably one of the perks of my job is that we go to Texas often, and so they've been. We get if people are going to go down there and they do a heli hunt or something, we'll send them ammo, but we're probably in the thousands of pigs that have been shot with G9 stuff. A lot of
like
it pistol.
Assassinated. You said assassinated earlier. I like that better.
Yeah.
That's good.
So there's been our EHP is the first thing we tested on. I went to a place in Texas, and it was raining, and so super loud, but these pigs came in, and we shot 4 of them in 5 minutes, and with a Glock 19, and had good result. The sniper stuff was all tested on pigs there because we could get them feeding on corn, not sportsman, whatever, but you get the heads right next to each other. And so then you shoot the front one and the back one runs away and you shoot that one. And then we got no frag coming out. And so that's one of those ways we made sure that we weren't going to have an overpenetration, where I've said overpenetration is not an issue in the sniping community. It probably because now you're going from a 9mm, which is very underpowered, to a 308 that is vastly overpowered for what you need for that.
Yeah.
I would have been nice to have some of that. I had an experience with a hog up here, as a matter of fact. I know that I moved from Florida. I come up here and I'm out on patrol. And I see that this nice lady and her kids had struck a hog. And I get made fun of on the radio. We're like, we don't have hogs in Idaho. Well, this is somebody's domesticated hog that had gotten away and had gotten a little feral. So I walk up, I was like, it's okay, ma'am. Everything's going to be all right. I'm going to put it out of its misery. It had broken legs on the front. So hog's laying there. So I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So I just look down and shoot it once. It screams and squeals and just keeps going nuts and starts flopping all over. So 4 more rounds. It's okay, ma'am. Everything's fine. Bam, 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 bam. Murdering this thing on the side of the road. It had very little penetration. I was not very impressed. That was with the 45. So 45, law enforcement, hollow point, and man, we have that issue quite a bit. We have to put down a lot of elk and moose and deer out here. And you notice that if you aren't like well trained and placed on where to put that round specifically, that round's not going to be effective. So I've seen that in live action. And I've often thought about that. Okay, how is this going to perform in a gunfight? If it's through a barrier or with somebody that's at some distance.
Carhartt.
Yeah, I know.
Seen it.
It's practical.
Hollow points look really good in gel. They just don't, that doesn't translate well to reality.
Yeah.
Right.
Which it makes total sense to me. Now you explain it all.
This is such a wild thing to listen to, right? Because what does everybody expect? When we say, all right, what's your background? You're in the ammo industry. What does everybody think? I mean, I would have thought, military, right?
Yep.
Special warfare, law enforcement. That's just what you expect. But you see other businesses that are doing radically well because you came at it from a totally different approach. It was from like auto body, right?
Sure.
And that part, and then you see a different side of that in loading ammo since you were 13 years old and just looking at things differently.
You broke the mold, quite literally.
And you weren't encumbered by all the things that you'd been taught previously, that this is a superior round, you need a polymer, you need all of this other stuff, right? You just looked at it differently. Because it is, first time I looked at G9, it was Jake selling me that. Of course, going, oh, dude, you have to check this out. This is awesome. And I'm looking at it, and I was like, how can this be better than the stuff that they're coming out with that looks more complicated? There's more technology, right? Yeah. And it's back to basics.
It gets bigger. I mean, it must be better, right? Bigger's always better.
Man, but when a group came up here and we shot gel, it was by far and away, it was a bit of a loaded question when I asked how it did through glass, because I've done that.
Yeah.
With several different rounds. But yeah, it was wild to see it on display against other major manufacturers.
I'm curious what your facility looks like. I haven't been there yet. We are going to go there at some point and get some video for you guys. But how much can you produce? Like, how many employees you guys have? What's it look like?
Sure. I think we got 17 employees on the books. The manufacturing side does not take a lot of employees. So we went with high production, high quality machinery. And Kyle, you want to kind of run us through what we have and capabilities on?
Yeah. So one of the conversations we had in the very beginning was, did we want to stay with hand loaders, get a lot of people, or did we want a lot of great machines and a few great people that ran them? And obviously we went for quality and efficiency and the great team aspect, keeping it low. So we have every feature that you would want for a round available inside. So from the testing perspective, everything that we do load, we test 100% inside, from the hour to the round count. From what capabilities we want, we have the ability to actually test in every way, shape, and form, down to whatever degree you want to look at. So we truly know what we're putting out on a regular basis. So when you get over onto the production side, we prime all of our own cases. We have all the data for being able to check depth of primers and if they're crooked, straight, and how they are going into the case. You move over into our loading side, and there are inspection checks internally built into the machine so that as it's going through the loading process, it's actually going to say, nope, you just failed. You have too little powder, too deep of an inset projectile, and the machine will smartly not do any additional features to that round and kick it out on the fail side. And so each one of our machines is actually built to do inspection along the process. Yet, we still have one of the highest rated inspection machines. It's one of the only ones that the military accepts for the quality and quantity of checks that it does. And so we will still, even though these machines are checking it along the way and ejecting bad ones, we will run it through an inspection machine that we can set for up to, I think, 26 different features that is looking at it. And on 9mm, it's inspecting all of these features at a rate of almost 400 parts per minute. And so the machine is actually set to fail every single round so that it's automatically going to go out the fail side unless right at that last millisecond it gets the green light and it opens up the little gate and goes out the good side. And then you move on to, we waterproof every single one of our rounds. We do the neck and the primer pocket so that, and we've done our own testing on waterproofing as well. The company says that they rate their waterproofing, I believe, at 30 feet underwater for...
It's 10 meters for 24 hours.
Yeah.
Salt water.
And we've done our own testing with that, and then we ran control versus 1 hour, 3 hours, 24 hours, and a full week that they were underwater. And the results, if you looked at them on paper, were exactly the same. You wouldn't have been able to see the difference between the control and whichever volume of hours they were under. And so we waterproof every single one of our rounds. And then through packaging, we still have that human element where we trust our machines. They do a great job, but as our team is going through the packaging and boxing process, they're actually visually looking at the primers and inspecting different aspects so that we know that if the product is going out to the customer, that it's going to be a perfect product. And so with that, because one of the things that we truly care about is quality. If you as a law enforcement officer are going to be taking it out there, if you are church security protecting your congregation, or you're just the soccer mom who is on her way home and runs into that bad moment, you may only have that one opportunity to get one shot off. That shot needs to count every single time.
How many rounds can you guys manufacture in a day or minute?
So what we're looking at, if you have a 70% throughput, because machines go down, everything else, and so if we're running one crew for 5 days a month, that puts us at 4.3 million rounds per month. We've never hit that number, but it's that's a capability. We also have a bunch of hand machines. It's hard to say, and the other part of it is how many different calibers are we doing, because those conversions and those changeovers take a long time.
Right.
And so if we, but we have an entire division where we can do hand loading things. And so if we need the ultimate precision on things, we do support some PRS shooters, and so they're wanting something that is unrivaled accuracy. And so when we do that, we'll do that stuff by hand. We can produce rifle bullets at 60 plus rounds per minute. Handgun is about 110 on a single loader, and we have 3 of those loaders. And so it adds up pretty quick when you're doing 300 rounds a minute. We can inspect over 300 rounds a minute. Where waterproofing packaging was the limiting factor for a long time. And so I got to brag on my oldest son a little bit. He actually is an engineer. He's graduating from Embry-Riddle. But when he was 18, 19, I talked to him. We went to SHOT Show, and it was $2.3 million to buy a packaging machine. I was like, we can't do this. And it took up 60 linear feet to put it together and everything.
And only did one caliber and one case size.
And it was a 2-year lead time or something. And so he just left for college, and he says, Dad, I want a shot at this. I think I can build a machine. I'm like, okay. How much that's going to cost? And he's like, I'm going to have to use my college money for it, and I'm going to build this machine. I just want you to buy it from me at the end. And so there's commitment there. And so he builds this thing, and we get it done. This was in February that we had the conversation. 1st of June, it's running, and it was running at around 300 parts per minute.
360.
Yeah, so it's keeping up with everything else, and that was his prototype. Almost failed the class because the opening line in the class, it was machine building, and it said build a simple machine, and the professor's like, you did not build a simple machine. But he gets a job in the water jet shop, and he got a job in the machine shop, so he could on his spare time build this thing. Builds it, it works, and he's like, I saw problems in this one, so I built another one that now does the collation of the bullets and into the trays and in the packaging, does the lot tickets, all of this, and it's all automated.
Wow.
And he does this one, and he licenses it out to the company that we have, our waterproofing company. And so Hernan actually licensed it and wants to build these and sell them. And so packaging was one of those things where we could not find. We bought a machine that was $125,000, worth about 10. And just has been problematic and a hard company to work with. It's a small company. And so he saw that opportunity, and he built this. He's going to go into automation. That's what he wants to do.
Yeah. So you've flipped the entire industry upside down, it sounds like. Have other companies tried to emulate you, and how do you guys protect against that?
So this is the negative on G9 is that we're working in the military industrial complex, and there's a reason that Kennedy spoke out against it, and you have these things that are there's an maybe unfair basis to how that goes usually. For us, there are those that have infringed upon us. They know it. There's a knowing that's being done. We have sent letters out. Our patents were issued unique and novel inventions, and so we did not have to cite anyone else's work in that. So the ones that do parallel it, they did it far enough away that it's not as effective. And so in the third party testing, they don't score as well because they didn't include some of the elements that we do in that. The other hard part, the real hard part, is where that gets works against everything, is that the procurement of all the things you need, particularly powder right now. So primers were the last problem. Powder's the kind of current problem here, and so there are those that will work deals that you get cut off, where there are weird things that happen during testing for contracts. And
that would never happen with government contracts.
Well, and so there's where we have a really good showing when it's a fair, legit test, and there are those things, but you can't. If we throw out some of the names in the industry, and I'm going to use ones that have not been a problem to us, but then like if you look at General Dynamics, I'm not going to be able to sue and win against General Dynamics, and so there's certain things with size you can do that. We would, if this was in a different industry, it would be a lot easier. It would go faster and easier. There are very few. I'm in a very unique category. If you look at those that have a good idea, that then apply for a patent, get the patent, the number is down to about 1 in 100, and then make a single dollar back on it ever, it shrinks again. And so to have a functioning business as the original patent holder, it's less than 1/10%. And so to do that, and the reason is it's really hard and it's really easy to get squashed. I was fortunate enough that early on I got a couple of business partners, and one of them in particular is quite wealthy and able to help me weather a lot of that. And but getting past that hump and getting in and established in the military industrial complex, and that is difficult.
Yeah, that's wild. I'm not surprised, of course, that you have to, you're dealing with companies with huge amounts of money. I know Kootenai County Sheriff picked up your ammo, right? We just talked to Brett Nelson the other day on here, and he mentioned that. Are you having trouble getting in with law enforcement agencies? So I know, like my department, I work for the California Highway Patrol, 7,000 sworn, huge department. It's so difficult to affect any change in a department that size, especially if you came with this new novel round, and you could do all the testing in the world, and some chief somewhere is going to be like, oh, I don't know. That's not how we've always done it. So are you having trouble getting into that realm at all?
Yeah, it was impossibly hard. One of the places that is part of that is the FBI does testing on all these things. So it's the FBI protocol. Well, on the FBI protocol, we don't expand, so it's an automatic failure. So there was a bias to make sure that that was upheld. And so we've had trouble getting that out. When the military sponsored third-party testing for us, and that data went out, it leveled the playing field. And so what they were looking at is that this is better. Texas is and has been at war for a while, and people don't realize what's actually going down on the border there.
Yep.
And so for them, they had enough going on, and they had enough numbers to it to say that this company's Hollow Point in particular is failing us hard, and they're not doing in reality what their test data shows even. And so we got the invite from Texas to come down. And Texas is not a state, it's a republic. They run things a little bit different there. And so the Department of, Department of Criminal Justice, what's their?
TDCJ.
Yeah. They were the ones that invited us down. And we have a sole source contract with them, and they let us write, they said, we don't even understand this technology. I see that it works. Write a paragraph for me what it is. And so I did that. They did a small edit on it, and then that's how they procure off of it. So we're the only ones that can supply that. What they wanted effective things that would keep their officers safe. And so there's others where it's never going to be used. And so then we can play the game on who gets paid and all of these things and the favors that are done. Where it's actually required and it's going to be used, Texas, they're all in favor of it. And so that's probably law enforcement was easy once we got past that independent testing.
Are you prepared to scale up? I feel like it'll snowball once, big departments start picking it up. Everybody's going to want to jump on board. You guys ready to expand?
Yeah, there's things in the works where we need to grow.
Yeah.
Like that's part of anything. You look at some of the things, even if we own the patent and everything else, Crescent didn't invent the open-end adjustable wrench. They assumed that. And so people give them credit for that. We're in that position if we don't grow fast. And so that's what I'm pushing for right now.
Yeah, that's got to be a lot on your plate. I imagine
It
some
is.
bigger companies are probably trying to buy you out, I would guess.
That
Sure.
was my question. I'm sure there's got to be major manufacturers of ammunition that have either come at you to try to subdue the movement or to try to scoop you up.
Yeah, it's much easier to put me out of business than it is to buy me.
Yeah.
And so we've seen that quite a bit. And I think everyone's retired from this, but there was the first year we were in business, I got to a VP at ATK. And he was going to move things around. And so he started asking me, it's like, how many years you been in business? How many machines do you have? How many employees do you have? And I said, I'm looking at a licensing deal. We're gonna do this, and it's gonna make you a ton of money. And so competing directly against Gold Dot, we showed him, and he's like, yep, your round wins in every category. That's awesome. And so all I want to do is buy your company. And I said, I'm not selling the company. I'm selling licensing to this one product. We have all this patent over here that has nothing to do with this. And he said, look, I will pay you whatever you want for your company, and what it'll be is it's going to be way less than the marketing that I have already spent on Gold Dot. And so if there's something on the market that will knock it off, I want to buy it and bury it. And so that was the eye opener to me, that I don't want something better for our law enforcement. I don't want something better for our military. I want to protect my own marketing funds, and I want to bury your company doing it.
Yeah.
Wow.
In spite of the safety of the people that are actually on the front line of all
Right.
these things.
Sure.
That's what drives, that is such an afterthought
God damn.
to those people making those decisions.
Oh,
It's-
but the numbers that they're talking about there, I am really good at mental math, and I can calculate those things well and everything else. I can't do zeros. I don't know if my wife spent like $1,000 on Christmas or $1 million on Christmas. The zeros just don't make any sense to me. And so when we start talking about zeros, the most people, they will justify doing something that is definitely sketchy and probably definitely bad for the country if there's enough zeros in it.
Yeah.
And so it all becomes justifiable by money, and that just doesn't seem to work in my brain.
Yeah.
We're grateful for that.
We are.
Yeah, keep doing what you're doing.
I just like it's a common theme here on the podcast. Like, we love talking to local businesses, and I'm blown away all the time, like literally all the time, about the things that exist up here in such a small community.
Right.
And how it's always like a grassroots, it starts that way, and then things start to blossom out of that. It's awesome.
Beyond what's known, I get to see behind the curtain every once in a while, and there are some amazing things here that people don't understand. What's just below the surface and what we're doing. There is more class-leading technology in this little tiny valley than anywhere I know of.
That's insane. And I've heard that too. I haven't heard specifics yet, but I've heard that, and now I'm so curious. Start pulling threads, see where it goes.
That's awesome.
Well, we're cracking an hour, and I don't want to take any more of your time. But Joshua, Kyle, G9 Defense, thank you guys. That was actually incredibly informative. I think I'm tracking, and now I'm gonna have to go get rid of all my Gold Dot and switch it out for G9. Which
You knew that was coming.
I knew it was coming,
Yeah.
so it's all right. Yeah, happy to do that.
Appreciate you guys having us
Yeah,
on.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank you guys.
definitely.
Looking forward to seeing the lab.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Catch you next time.